Well, hello, ladies and gents. Robert Sykes, KetoSavage.com, and welcome to another Ask Me Anything episode. Today's topic is going to be one of those controversial, dicey topics that I have to kind of maneuver appropriately. So get ready to roll up your sleeves and dive in because we're going to go deep on this topic. We're going to be talking about steroids, performance-enhancing drugs, as it relates to and compares to natural bodybuilding and keeping it, what is within the realms of human possibility naturally. So, without further ado, let's dive into that. But first, let's roll the intro. All right, so I've got some notes here on my phone, and I want to make sure I hit this topic very clearly and don't miss anything. So I've got some pointers that I want to make sure I cover. To be fair, this was not a question that was submitted in the Ask Me Anything form. This is just a question that I've been asked a lot over the years, and it's been on my mind to talk about, and I haven't talked about it yet in depth, but I figured this A.M.A. platform would be a great way to do so. So here we go. First, let's start with the definition, all right? So steroids, performance-enhancing drugs, PEDs versus natural bodybuilding and just keeping it natural. So when I talk about performance-enhancing drugs, I talk about steroids, I'm talking about anything that you inject exogenously that is meant to alter your hormonal state and basically give you an advantage or give you an edge when it comes to putting on muscle, recovering faster, and just going beyond the realms of what is physiologically possible as a human being. I mean, there are tons of, supplements out there. There are tons of drugs out there. There are tons of hacks out there. But as it relates to performance-enhancing drugs and steroids, growth hormones, things of that nature, there's definitely a point of way beyond what is physiologically possible. When you see a competitive bodybuilder on the Mr. Olympia stage that is sub 5% body fat and walking around at 300 pounds, that is beyond what is possible in the scope of human beings. So natural human beings. I mean, you can definitely inject that and reach that level, but it's not something that can happen naturally. I don't care what kind of Viking DNA you've got in you. That's just not humanly possible from a natural state. So natural bodybuilding, on the other end of the spectrum, is simply avoiding, using any of those performance-enhancing drugs, steroids, growth hormones, things of that nature. There are even supplements that are not allowed in the realms of natural bodybuilding. Like a lot of the pre-workouts have, amphetamines and stuff in it. A lot of over-the-counter stuff breaks or breaches what is allowed in natural bodybuilding federations. They are very, very strict, and they have a very strict period of time in which you can't have taken any steroids for a 10-year window, depending on what federation you're in. Like the WNBF federation that I compete in has a 10-year window in which if you have not been natural that entire 10-year period, you're not eligible to compete. So a very strict protocol there. And the reason for that is, say you take steroids, you develop a lot of mass, a lot of muscle memory with your body in the state of using those exogenous hormones, and then you get off steroids for a couple years and you try and compete on a natural stage. That's not really fair to the natural competitors because that muscle doesn't forget. I mean, muscle memory is a thing, and if you have this massive increase in tissue with using steroids, then you get off of them, it's not like you're going to lose all of that. Like your body's going to be able to retain a lot of that. So it's still not really a fair playing field. That's why they have such a long year period of which you have to maintain that natural status. So that's kind of just a high-level view and definition of comparing and contrasting natural versus performance-enhancing drugs in the scope of bodybuilding. Why I haven't talked about this much in the past. So I'm going to begin this with a story. My grandfather he told me one time that if you have to tell people you work hard, then you're not a hard worker. And for whatever reason, that always just stuck in my mind. It really, really stuck. And at the time, I put a lot of emphasis in hard work, and I still put a lot of emphasis in hard work. But at the time, I didn't have the confidence that I do now, so I felt like I had to tell people how hard I worked. And when he told me that, it's like, let my actions do the talking. Don't speak about it. Don't tell people. Don't feel like I need to tell people how hard I work. They'll recognize and they'll take stock in it without me having to say anything. So I kind of used that lesson and applied it to the topic of bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding versus enhanced bodybuilding. And I never talked about this. I've mentioned it on the podcast. I've talked about it briefly. But I haven't really dove deep into it because I've always kind of felt that if I have to tell people I'm a natural bodybuilder, it's like I'm not a natural bodybuilder, which is just this weird phenomenon, but that's just kind of how my head was wired for the longest time. I felt that if I had to tell people and make it a point to make it just obvious that I'm a natural bodybuilder, that in some kind of weird redirect way, that would indicate that I'm not a natural bodybuilder, which in hindsight now I feel like in that context I should talk more about it. I mean, when I look at the ketogenic diet and how proud I am about the ketogenic diet, how, you know, just confident I am that the ketogenic diet is a great nutritional protocol to create everlasting health, I want to talk about that. Like, I've built a business, I've built a brand, I've built a lifestyle around talking and educating and influencing others about the ketogenic diet. And I feel like I need to do that same thing when it comes to natural bodybuilding, because I feel like it's a very healthy way to go about bodybuilding. I feel like it's great for longevity. I feel like it's great for overall health and well-being. And I feel like it needs to be talked about. So I'm kind of shifting my philosophy towards why I should or should not talk about this topic. And I'm moving in the direction of I'm going to make this a very, strong point and pillar of who I am, the brand that I've built, and the content that I create, because I believe in it so strongly. So that's that. The next thing I want to talk about is life path, all right? So I have nothing against people that take steroids. I have nothing against people that take growth hormones or performance-enhancing drugs of any kind. It's not my place to judge. If they want to do that, that's their decision. They've made that decision. It's on them. You do you. I don't feel like it's my place to judge them. I have no desire or intention to judge them. They make sanctioned events for people that take stuff. They make sanctioned events for people that do not take stuff. And if that's your life path, if that's your decision, then more power to you. There's a lot of professional bodybuilders where that's their livelihood. That's how they put food on the table. That's how they support their family. That's how they support their kids, their loved ones. It's not my place to tell them that they're wrong for doing that. Like, if they're competing on an elite IFBB stage in the Mr. Olympia and that's how they survive, then that's just kind of, it comes with the territory. Like, that's just what you have to do to compete at that elite level. I don't care. Like, that's their decision. More power to them. They do them. And I don't care if you're natural. More power to you. That's your decision as well. I've gone the natural route, and I'll dive into why later, but I want to make it very, very clear that I do not care, personally, if you choose to take performance-enhancing drugs. That is your opinion. That's your prerogative. That's your life. Go for it. I do want to talk about honesty, because I feel like that is a very relevant conversation here. So if you choose to stay natural, that's fine. More power to you. No problems at all. If you choose to take steroids, that's fine. More power to you. No problems at all. If you choose to take steroids and not talk about it, that's also fine. More power to you. No problems at all. That'd be like me judging you for your sexual preference. Like, I don't care. Do you, and I'm fine with it. However, there comes a point in which if you are taking steroids, performance-enhancing drugs, growth hormone, and not talking about it, and also posing as an influencer or an expert in a relevant space, industry, or community, whether that be the fitness industry, the health and nutrition industry, the keto community, and you're not being honest about that, then that is just incredibly dishonest, and you're full of shit, to be quite honest and frank with you, because you're having a far-reaching impact on many more people than just yourself. Like, if you choose to take steroids and not talk about it, then that's nobody else's business. That's the decision you've made. Go for it. If you choose to take steroids and not talk about it, and then you're putting yourself out into the world as an influencer and an expert in the space, or not even an expert, just somebody with power and with stroke and with influence, then you have people relying on you to be honest. You have influence on people. They are looking to you for advice. They are looking to you as an example. The moment you take that leap and start putting out content as a podcaster, as a YouTuber, as an Instagrammer, as somebody that knows what they're talking about, and you're not honest with your audience, then that has a very far-reaching effect. The moment you decide to put out content, it's like that Spider-Man quote or whatever that movie is, like, with great power comes great responsibility. And when you choose to accept that power of influence over people, you should be morally obligated and responsible enough to be honest with those people. So for the people out there that are not honest in that regard, And that's where I've got an issue. That's where I've got a problem, and I have lost so much respect for so many people that do just that. And there are a lot more people out there, unfortunately, than y'all realize. I mean, steroids specifically, performance-enhancing drugs, growth hormone, that is incredibly common within the space of the fitness industry, within the ketogenic space, within just bodybuilding, obviously, within many sports, many sports. There's people that take stuff and they're playing tennis. I mean, there's a lot of drugs out there. And if you're willing to take those drugs and willing to be an influencer in a relevant space and not be honest with your audience, I've got issue with that. And it's not that I personally care what you do, but I care for the people that you influence. It's unfair to them to guide them a certain way and then mislead them, and then they have this false perception of what's humanly possible. And for me, it's just annoying. Like, as a coach, it's annoying because I'll have clients sign up to work with me, and then I'll have an initial client call with them, and then I wind up spending 30 minutes explaining to them why they're not going to look like X, Y, or Z in a matter of 2 months because they're not taking the stuff that they're taking. They can't achieve that on a natural level. So it becomes an annoyance for me because I spend so much time having to rewire people's brains into what is physiologically possible as a human being in a natural state. And it goes beyond just steroids, performance-enhancing drugs. It's same thing can be true for influencers that are putting out these just crazy low caloric intake amounts. Like, if they're recommending people take sub 1,000 calories in, and these people are starving themselves, chronically undereating, I have to spend the first 30 minutes of a client call with them teaching them about metabolism, teaching them about how to reverse that and improve their health for the long term. And the same is true with steroids, performance-enhancing drugs. I get so sick and fed up with trying to educate people that have been just misled and misguided by people that have influence in the space, and it just becomes this minefield because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. I don't want to, throw rocks on the people that are taking stuff. I mean, that's their thing. That's their decision. Go for it. But at the same time, it puts me in a very uncomfortable position because I don't want to throw them under the bus, but at the same time, I don't want to lie to my clients or people in the space that look to me for the truth. So it's like I'm in an unfortunate position because of other people's dishonesty, and that's very, very frustrating to me. So I'm going to be honest to my clients. If they ask me point blank, is this possible and why or why not? I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm going to be honest to them, and I'm going to be honest to the space as a whole because I may not always be right. There's lots of things that I've probably said over the years as a content creator that are not right. But I can promise you this. I can promise you that I've never said anything or put anything out that I did not in my heart at the time believe to be true or honest. I have never sacrificed my integrity or been dishonest as an influencer, and I feel like that should be what everybody that creates content should strive for. So there's that little rant there. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, let's see here, my personal decisions to stay natural. So when I got into bodybuilding, when I got into weightlifting, when I got into nutrition, my overarching goal was just to be healthy and be the best that I can be. And I'm drawn to a long game approach to things. I like the long game. I get excited when I hear that I'm not going to be able to see the fruits of my labor for 10, 20, 30 years. Like, for whatever reason, in my masochistic brain, that appeals to me. So I never was really drawn to the idea of using performance-enhancing drugs. I've had the opportunity. I've had several people offer it. I've had several people recommend it if I wanted to pursue that path in bodybuilding and compete at a higher level. But I've never liked it. Like, it seemed contradictory to me to be preaching this message of health and wellness and nutrition and longevity, but then do something that I inherently know is not healthy. And people that are caught up in using this stuff, they're fed this lie, and they think that there's always a drug to counteract the negative effects of the drug they're taking. And that is true to an extent. And I don't know that much about steroids, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in that. But to think and believe that they're not going to have an adverse effect on your body long term, then you're just living in ignorance. You're delusional, because it does have an effect. There are very many pro bodybuilders that have spoken to the adverse effects that it causes, and they've done so in a very honest and upfront way. And I have utmost respect for those individuals because they're peeling the curtain back and they're showing what's going to happen long term. There's been so many people, so many bodybuilders at a very young age that have died because of the stuff and the decisions that they've made. Now, that's not always going to happen, but there's not really going to be a lot of good that comes from it from like a health and biological well-being standpoint by injecting yourself with a whole bunch of additional hormones past the physiological natural level. So there's that. So I never really was drawn to something that I knew was contradictory to my overall desire to be the healthiest and best that I could be. On a challenging standpoint, or on like just this mental fortitude standpoint, so there's a debate between naturals and enhanced athletes of which one is harder. I don't want to throw shade on any group because if you're going to be, like, we'll just use bodybuilding as an example because I know that sport well. If you're going to be a bodybuilder, it's going to take a lot of hard work. It's going to take a lot of discipline and consistency, and it is hard no matter what you decide to do. Whether you decide to stay natural, it's going to be difficult. Whether you decide to use performance-enhancing drug, it's going to be difficult. You have to be very, very, hard and dedicated to compete at a high level in the sport of bodybuilding, natural or not. However, let's just take myself as an example. If I was to clone myself and have two of me, one that is natural and one that decides to use performance-enhancing drugs, I would argue that the natural version of myself is going to have a greater challenge ahead of them. It's going to be more difficult, with everything else being equal, than the person that's taking the performance-enhancing drugs. You're able to recover faster, so overtraining isn't as big of an issue. You're able to get away with a little bit more with regard to the accuracy and discipline and consistency of your nutrition. You can't just get away with anything. Like, you can't eat crap all the time and look great. Some people can, but that's not the norm. So you still have to be on top of your nutrition, but you can get away with a lot more if you're taking certain types of drugs that are going to counteract a lot of the adverse effects of, having some pizza during your contest prep or having a beer or two during your contest prep. Like, those decisions that stray away from your diet and your plan are going to have more of a negative effect on those that are natural and don't have the benefits of those performance-enhancing drugs in their system. Like, that can't really be argued. So when it comes to the debate of which is harder, natural or not, I don't want to bring my biases to the table and say that natural is harder because I am a natural athlete. But when I look at the facts, like, I just can't seem to think that it's going to be easier for the natural competitor. So there's my take on that. And then, honestly, just to sum this all up, I've kind of gone on this diatribe here about steroids and the sport and what my thoughts and views are on it. But I'm excited about the long game. I'm excited about the brand, the business, the life, the well-being, the longevity that I've put together. I'm very passionate about keto. I am very self-aware in myself, and I know that the ketogenic diet has had a profound impact on my life and well-being, and that's why I'm so dedicated and motivated to share that message with others. And the same is true with natural bodybuilding. Natural bodybuilding as a whole can be a very unhealthy sport. Like, you can take it to a very unhealthy extreme. You can have these eating disorders that result from it. You can have, poor health problems. You can have electrolyte imbalances that leave you crippled on the stage. There are a lot of horror stories within the sport of bodybuilding. But natural bodybuilding helps to mitigate that quite a bit. And natural bodybuilding coupled with the ketogenic diet, in my opinion and in my experience, is truly something of a whole nother horse of a different color, basically. Like, I feel like that is the best way to get the benefits of both, minimize any adverse effects, and then truly be able to sustain this lifestyle for the long haul and benefit from all the impacts that it can have on your life. Like, from a well-being standpoint, from a longevity standpoint, I feel like your quality of life is going to be much, much better. Your health span is going to be much, much better if you are able to, practice the sport of natural bodybuilding coupled with the ketogenic diet, coming from high-quality, nutritious sources of food. That's my take on it. That's why I'm so passionate about putting this message out there. So again, I don't want to be too lengthy here, but that is my take on, steroids, performance-enhancing drugs, growth hormone, as it relates to the sport of bodybuilding and ketogenic diet. So there's that. Do with it as you will. I'm very, very curious. Like I said, this is not a question that was submitted, so nobody's getting any free bricks for this one. This was just me talking. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts in the comments. I read all the comments, so feel free to throw any messages in there that you want. I look forward to reading them all, and I will see you for the next AMA. Y'all have a wonderful, wonderful day.